Hello, and welcome to the Rocketeer Minute Podcast, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, for the next 109 episodes, we are going to be talking about Walt Disney's greatest adventure film, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed movie, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And my name is Hal Bryan, and I'm a senior editor with the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And Jim, I could not be more excited about this absolutely ridiculous endeavor that we're starting out on.
It's a wonderful day. I feel a lot like the Rocketeer. You know, you don't know where you're going to land, but hopefully we'll be jelly side up. We'll see how it goes.
And I am wearing a helmet for safety's sake.
Awesome. Yes. Just make sure that you have all your buttons strapped up on your leather jacket.
Right.
This is a fun thing, and I have to make an open confession. I openly love this movie. There's nothing wrong with this movie to me. You can't say a bad thing about it because I know better.
I'm in the exact same boat. There's you might hold a gun to my head and say, well, maybe there are sort of technically better films, but I can't think of another one for which I have just more just pure affection, beginning to end. There's just nothing about it I don't just adore.
It was such an amazing confluence of great actors, a fantastic script, an excellent director, and of course, the thing that kind of wraps it all up in a neat bow is the music of James Horner, which this is one of his best performances. I think it may be the best composition he's ever created as a whole. It really ties the whole movie together. It soars. You hear this thing and you can't help but think of flying and just the lure of the skies with the sound. Just with a piano, it's amazing how it just pulls you right into the movie.
Absolutely. That it starts so gentle and so easy. It's not it's almost the antithesis, the perfect antithesis of a typical action movie score. It's not nervous anticipation. It's just this gentle excitement in the way that it flows as these hangar doors start opening. We see the blue sky. It's everything I love about flying. It's a beautiful day. We're going to go out. We're going to have a really nice time, go up in the air.
Yeah, and I guess we can set the scene. This is we are going to find out later. It is 1938, and it follows very closely. The original writer Dave Stevens, the creator of The Rocketeer, was a stickler for accuracy on things. And this movie starts at dawn on an October day in 1938, and we're getting just a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about credits. Are always a difficult thing to talk about, but let's talk about these opening credits. We're gonna see the main thing that was wrong with this movie right here in the opening, where Walt Disney Pictures presents. One of the biggest letdowns for this movie and keeping it from being a box office success was releasing it through Walt Disney Pictures. At the time, let's set the stage. This is 1991. This is actually the third week of June in 1991 when The Rocketeer premiered. This is directly in between two Disney movies, two great Disney movies. First, The Little Mermaid back in 1989, and Beauty and the Beast, which would be coming out in September of 91. So Walt Disney movies at the time, the picture version of it, and it still is to some extent, it's considered kids' movies. Walt Disney had also, the Walt Disney production companies had Touchstone pictures available to them, which was kind of an alternate title card that they could put at the front of more adult features. You'd seen it in movies like, well, probably the most famous one was the first big one was Pretty Woman. And it was considered, if you didn't hear the word Disney, you thought, oh, this is probably for adults. But in slapping that Walt Disney Pictures on the front of this, it kind of condemned it to being a matinee show.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that they say it twice, in effect. We got Walt Disney Pictures, then boom, Walt Disney Pictures presents.
Do we mention Walt Disney?
Yes, and by the way, this is Walt Disney Pictures.
I think that one card, well, there were a couple of things that caused problems with the success of this movie, but sending it through Walt Disney's made audiences, when they were looking at this, think, oh, I don't want to go see a kid's film. Other two big things on this was the poster, while beautiful, the original poster that came out for this was, it's a triumph of Art Deco. It was a beautiful thing with a stylized picture of looked like a robot-like man flying through the skies. That really didn't tell you much about what the movie was about, or whether an average action film moviegoer would want to go see this. It looks more like an art film. It was poorly marketed, and then on top of it, it was up against some really amazing competition. At the time, 2 weeks previously to this, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner had premiered to a $25 million box office opening. This was the beginning of the summertime. And it was out there making tons of money. A week after this movie premiered, it was completely tsunamied away with Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So it was up again, and that was everybody knew that movie was, you see Arnold Schwarzenegger on a motorcycle, you think, I wonder if that's an action movie. Yeah, this
right. Pretty clear.
So that kind of drew away all those other dollars, and it was difficult for that weekend to come up against these movies.
It's funny. I think back to that summer when this movie came out, or certainly maybe the preceding spring. I had read the Stevens graphic novel, and it wasn't it wasn't at the point where I am now, where I've tracked down other single issues and first appearances and things like that. But I'd read the basic story and completely fallen in love with it. And I remember but having no inkling that a movie was coming. And it's hard to imagine that now, but this was obviously the pre-internet days. If it wasn't in Starlog magazine, and if I didn't happen to see Starlog on the newsstand, you didn't really know what was happening. And I'm in a theater seeing something else that I've long since forgotten, but then all of a sudden there's a trailer for The Rocketeer, and my eyes still hurt from how wide they were opened staring at this, and I've just overjoyed to see a trailer for it. And all I wanted to do was then go watch that trailer again. Now, I could have pulled my smartphone out of my pocket, watched it 100 times if I wanted, but back then it was just a matter of watching and waiting and trying to figure out, when's it coming out, how can I be there, how many times can I afford to see it.
Yeah, and it looked like the trailer for this show was beautiful. It really sold it, sold heavily. You saw the action. There was Timothy Dalton in the scenes, and you thought, James Bond is going to be in this movie. And this was, right in the pocket there where he was doing The Living Daylights, and he was a brief run as Tim Dalton, but he was the guy in charge. And I think the Disney folks finally figured this out a bit too late. The day or the week after the movie premiered, they released the new poster, which features the more familiar sights and sounds. You see, Billy Campbell, holding onto his helmet, and the amazing Jennifer Connelly in profile, and Timothy Dalton, almost center screen there, to say there are real people in this movie, and it's not a cartoon, and you can actually watch something. And look, explosions. So they picked up the ball a little bit too late.
And it's fine for kids, but it's not just for kids.
So we see the Walt Disney Pictures fade out. And the next thing that comes up is in association with Silver Screen Partners 4. Now, Silver Screen Partners had a long history at the time of, they originally set up by a New York investment banker who was financing early pictures for HBO. When HBO stopped being, home box office was the title, but mostly they had paid for things like, prize fighting. You're watching boxing matches and special events like that, mostly sporting things. But HBO was trying to expand into made-for-TV movies, or movies that were capable of being released in a theater and then shown on HBO. There just wasn't enough software for the upcoming rise of cable. So Silver Screen Partners came about, and they were a limited partnership where they pool money, build a movie, and then show it in a theater, and expected to make half their money back, and then make the other half by licensing it to HBO for being the first place to show on air. And they did a lot of films. As we said before, Pretty Woman was a Touchstone feature, but they were also sponsored by Silver Screen Partners, and things like The Little Mermaid.
Now, forgive this potentially ignorant question, but were there Silver Screen Partners 1 through 3?
Yes, yeah, there were earlier ones.
It
was just what it was there were different groups of limited partners getting together, and Silver Screen Partners had done. I probably should have looked it up, but they like Silver Screen Partners 1, or they were just known as Silver Screen Partners. they had done a lot of movies in the late 70s that showed up on HBO, and I think like All the Right Moves, that kind of stuff. Chances are, if you saw a movie on HBO, it was probably sponsored by Silver Screen Partners. So I don't know for sure, but I'm sure like Chud and all those other monster movies were also paid for. But
we're there already.
We're down to there. But it was an hour and a half long movie, and it had appeared in a theater somewhere, and then they could say, look, just off the silver screen, here's a Silver Screen Partners movie. But by the time they got to their fourth iteration, they were doing movies like Dick Tracy. But they also financed The Little Mermaid. They did a lot of Disney films and a lot of Touchstone films.
Right.
The Rocketeer was, right in the middle of all things like White Fang, Three Men and a Little Lady, The Rescuers Down Under, as I said, Dick Tracy, Where the Heart Is, Dead Poet Society, Turner and Hooch, all of those movies that you saw every other Thursday on HBO,
right,
and forever and ever. They're probably still running them on HBO on demand. Those movies were the production company for HBO and for Disney. So generally they look for family-friendly movies, or at least movies that the entire family could go to. That was all happening back then, and Rocketeer happened to be one of those movies.
And Dick Tracy was 1990, if I remember right, so a bit before maybe the previous summer.
Right, yeah, and so was Pretty Woman.
Right, and it talk about two extremes in terms of success, and it's not what we're here to talk about. But Dick Tracy should have been a much better movie. A bright, vivid period piece comic book adaptation. And
if somebody ever does the Dick Tracy movie, they have a lot of material to go through.
They really do.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any possibility that soured moviegoers a little bit. We saw if probably not much in terms of the Rocketeer, because not that many people knew that this was a comic book and graphic novel character. But you start thinking, well, it's a Disney live action period piece based on a comic book character, and Dick Tracy certainly didn't do what they thought it would do. But who knows?
Yeah, that could be it. I mean, I think Dick Tracy's problem was that they thought that, well, if we put enough stars in it, it'll sell. We can sell whatever, and they didn't concentrate on the story or the production values. But I mean, it could have been that people were tired of it. They could have sold this movie a little bit more like Indiana Jones. I think
absolutely.
It pressed it as more of an Indiana Jones thing. There were a couple of negatives that were brought up that weren't really negatives. They were talking about they shouldn't have set it in the 30s, and they should, and it's like it has to be set in the 30s. It's a guy wearing an Art Deco helmet. You've got
right, and flying a GB. They probably should have gotten rid of that rocket too, because that's just distracting.
Yeah.
I want to see him in the scene. I want to see him flying away. Stick around, Billy Campbell.
Plane guy. Yeah. So there are enough things wrong with it, but from what we understand, there is a new Rocketeer movie in the works. I don't know when it'll come out or how far into development hell they are, but maybe they'll try doing more things. It's supposed to be set in the post-war era, maybe in the early 50s. So we'll see how that turns out. And
I have heard rumblings that it's probably set in the same universe, and does that mean we'll get a cameo from Bill Campbell, even though I think too many years have gone by?
Well, they could end with the new young Rocketeer handing him the rocket pack on a rocky crag on an island off the coast of Ireland. So,
exactly. As long as he doesn't say anything.
Yes, it just kind of looks sullenly.
Yes, the helmet awakens.
Yeah. The search for Jenny, but we'll see how it goes. So yeah, we get past the Money Man, and then it'll say a Gordon Company production, and we will talk about the Gordons a little bit later. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but these are the guys that were the actual producers, the ones work in the field, and they're two brothers, and we'll chat with them later. And of course, finally the last pre-title card is a Joe Johnston film, and Joe Johnston. Right. Joe Johnston is probably one of the bigger heroes of this movie. He got the look and feel exactly right. He definitely knows how to tell a story, and he definitely knows how to set the scene. You feel like you're watching 1938 here. You're not watching some idealized version of 1938, even though it is a quite idealized version of 1938. This movie is the reason why Joe Johnston was picked to make Captain America the First Avenger, because if you want to feel like you're back there in the pre-war or World War II era, Joe's your man.
Well, the Stevens graphic novel, I've always thought of it, and I'm not the first to say this, but it's a love letter to the era. It's absolutely, and Johnston did the same thing with the film. You get the feeling that he felt exactly the same way about the era that the late Dave Stevens did.
Yeah, he definitely loved it, and he appeals to anyone who knows that era and loves it as well. I mean, everything, the artwork, the design, all the streamlining and the lightning bolts and all that jazz. It's not overused, but it you're so immersed in that time when you're here. You don't have to think, well, that's how did they film that or how did they do this. You want to watch the story and understand where it was in the time it was. It really kind of hugs the Trilon and Perisphere and puts them out there for you. You know that if you know the time, you can smile and say they got this right.
Right. And that goes down to even the smallest of details. As these episodes roll along, we'll be going a little crazy with that. But there's some details on, the model of an airplane on a desk somewhere in the background that you might see for a fraction of a second is still appropriate for the era, and that's unbelievable. And we'll talk, of course, a lot about the flying in the movie and about the airplanes they got together for it, and all of the aviation that went into this movie. And this, to me, is really one of the last great aviation movies, before the CG era.
Yeah, you're seeing you're seeing real planes doing real banks and
right.
and loops and all kinds of stuff. I would put this and The Great Waldo Pepper as the two movies to see if you want to see great aerial work before all the computers took over. That pairing, I think, would be a good one.
Absolutely, yeah, especially in terms of sort of non-combat, non-war films. If I were to expand it to those, I would throw in the Battle of Britain in '69 and then Tora 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 in 1970 in terms of, wonderful real flying. And so much what we have today, there's a bit of real flying and then so much CG, and it's just not the same.
Yeah,
it makes airplane nerds like me wince and laugh.
Yeah, but we're gonna start seeing right now we start with a real airplane. The doors are being peeled back very cinematically, and we see that beautiful red monoplane parked across from obviously a hangar.
And we're going to talk about that airplane and, of course, the Hero GB quite a bit in some upcoming episodes. But that's our first glimpse of it's a replica or a recreation. It's a real airplane, but recreating the racer known as Miss Los Angeles. It's a Brown Aircraft Company, a B-2. And, beautiful job recreating that airplane, just as it was the Hero airplane, which we're going to get a glimpse of here in just another second or two, aren't we?
Oh yeah. And of course it opens there with as we're seeing Miss Los Angeles, we're seeing our hero of the show, Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell, at the time, this was his biggest role. He was Bill Campbell. If not for this movie, I think he would have gone down in the early part of his career as the guy who wasn't Will Riker. He actually was going to be Captain Picard's number one up until I think it ended like 2 weeks before they were starting the film, and I
hadn't heard that one.
They had gotten Jonathan Frakes. They hired Jonathan Frakes at the last minute and said, "Sorry, Bill, you can come back on a guest shot." And he did come back for a single shot. If you look for the early, I think it was season 2 episode called "The Outrageous Okona," where he was a space pirate, or would-be space pirate. But yeah, he could have had a whole different career here and wound up, directing the Thunderbirds kids movie instead of going on to Once and Again and a bunch of other 30-something type shows.
And you had to bring the Thunderbirds movie into this if you want as a lifelong diehard beloved Jerry Anderson fan. That I don't know, that movie's not quite as horrible as it could be, but it's close.
Yeah. You got to give. You give the late Bill Paxton some room there, but it was everybody had a paycheck that day. Yes, for heaven's sake, Gandhi! Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's
we digress.
Yes. But Bill Campbell is our hero in here, and he is perfectly cast. I can't think of anybody that would have fit into this. Both Joe Johnson and Dave Stevens agreed at the time that Bill Campbell was their Rocketeer. He actually went out. He had never heard of the Rocketeer when they were casting for this movie, but he bought a copy of one of the comics and took it to the barbershop and said, "I need this haircut." And they, sure enough, they chopped his hair just right, so he had that 6 cowlicks going every which way. And he does look like Cliff Secord, our hero in this movie.
He does. He looks like he just stepped right off the cover of the book.
Yeah. And by the way, if you haven't read the graphic novel, please go out. You may have seen the movie and loved it, but you will love even more or maybe just as much as the Dave Stevens artwork. It's a fantastic collection. Dave did not create many. He didn't leave much behind. Unfortunately, we lost him about a decade ago from the time of this recording to cancer. But his artwork is fantastic, and seeing him tell a story with his pen and ink is an amazing thing. We have a place online. If you go to our website, rocketeerminute.com, just go to the shop section. You can pick up a bunch of Dave Stevens artwork and books. But really, look at the comics and see there. I must warn you in advance. There's a major difference from the movie. It's not as family friendly as the movie is, but definitely something to check out if you want to know the full Rocketeer verse.
And another quick warning is that you'll look at it, you'll get into it, and it will undoubtedly spark a small obsession, and you'll be spending your life thinking, "Gosh, what else has he done? Can I spend hundreds of dollars on the big beautiful oversized slipcase hardcover books that collect all of the artwork?" It boggles my mind. I know we'll talk about Stevens more in upcoming episodes, but it boggles my mind why isn't he as well known strictly for his artwork as, say, Alex Ross?
Yeah, I think
I put him right up there.
I think it's just the matter that he was not prolific. I think was the biggest problem, that there isn't a lot of his that we see. I mean, it's like Coleridge and writing about Kubla Khan and Xanadu. You just don't have enough. You wish there were more, but there isn't. So just make do with what we have, and hopefully we'll have more things. By the way, the Rocketeer series, even though we no longer have Dave Stevens, the Rocketeer series of comic books is still out there, and people are making new stuff. There's actually, while we are recording this, there will be a new High Flying Adventures book coming out, which will also be available. I'm trying to get some of the artists who worked on the stories for that. Hopefully, we'll have them later on during this show. But there are new Rocketeer adventures that you can read online, or not online, but you can order online. But check us out. We also have that at our shop at rocketeerminute.com. And speaking of heroes, we now are getting our first glimpse of the hero plane in this minute. We see a radial engine and a propeller with snake eyes and a 4-leaf clover. So a little bit of good and bad luck in a circle. Where does that? Do you know where that nose art comes from?
Actually, off the top of my head, I don't. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more as we get into upcoming episodes. I want to say, without committing to it, that it was appropriate and period to the original airplane that this one recreates, the GB Model Z. But you know what? Let me confirm that, and we'll dig into that deeper in an upcoming episode. My
undergraduate degree was film creation, and one of the things that my film teachers taught me was that when you zoom in close, you limit information, and we are getting very limited information about what this plane is that's moving by. We're seeing the cowling, we're seeing that nose art, we see rivets and turnbuckles and all kinds of things as it passes in front of the screen. So it's just kind of this amorphous shape that we're going to see a lot more of in the next few minutes. But over it, we see another title for a cast member who is a great actor, Alan Arkin. He decades and decades of great films. Consistently, I don't know who his casting agent was, but they did a great job. I mean, I first knew of him when I was a kid. I was taken to see the movie Poppy, where he was the head of a Puerto Rican family that moved to Spanish Harlem, and he was a single dad and took care of his family. And great, I totally believed he was from Puerto Rico and barely spoke English, and I didn't. That was my first introduction to Alan Arkin. And I started seeing him in a bunch of other movies, and thinking this guy's fantastic. And he plays everything so low key, you don't notice that he is a star. He was in a Carl Reiner comedy called The Russians Are Coming, where he was a Russian, and he was a Russian submarine captain. It's like, oh, that's that guy. That's the guy who was the Puerto Rican guy in the last movie I just saw.
Well, it's funny you mentioned not only the Russians, but you mentioned seeing him as a character actor playing this foreign part, because I realize this sounds like something. Oh, you must have just looked this up, but I've known him since I've known of him. I don't know Alan Arkin. He's not here with me today. Known of him since I was about 10 years old, and there was a made-for-TV movie that I remember was, for some reason, sort of a big deal around our house. The whole family got together. We really wanted to watch it, but it was the Defection of Seamus Kudirka.
Oh, yeah.
It was about this Soviet, I think he was a merchant marine or whatever the sort of the equivalent was, who leapt from one ship to another to escape and get out of communist Soviet Russia. So from that, at that point, I thought, oh, wow, they got a Russian guy to play this, and of course 78, that's still a pretty strong Cold War era for our childhood.
Yeah, and I know my kids know him from Edward Scissorhands, and
oh sure,
and I mean probably his most famous one was the Mike Nichols movie, that Catch-22, and he was Yossarian in that movie, and he had a really carried a lot of that film, and it was a comedy, but not quite a comedy, and it was very confusing, but he managed to make this absurdist movie. He was kind of the organizing sensibility for the whole thing.
It's really it's funny. Forgive yet another tangent, but to those people listening, when you get to know Jim and me, you'll realize that's all we've got, our tangents. But as we're recording this weekend, I'm finishing up a feature story for a magazine for the Experimental Aircraft Association where I work. We have a B-25 bomber in our collection, and it was one of the ones in the film Catch-22. So it's so funny you mention that right now, because I'm kind of up to my neck in that movie and the history and things like that. So we've got this B-25 bomber. We're going to have it flying, in the next couple of years. And so right now I'm, everywhere I look, it's Catch-22 this, and so I feel like I'm just like up to my eyes in it.
Yeah, he's everywhere though. I mean, Alan Arkin. Yeah, I can remember seeing in a movie that I was in Tennessee, and I had nothing to do that night. I was working for an oil company, and I wound up going to see a movie, and it was The In-Laws with him and Peter Falk. And to this day, I keep seeing him running around on an airport with Peter Falk yelling "Serpentine, Serpentine," trying to get him to act like a spy and avoid being shot at. And he plays such a frustrated guy. And in this movie, he gets to be a little bit lower key than his normal frantic self.
Right. Yeah, you see elements of that frustration, but it's more just sort of a slightly tired exasperation. But he's so good at that, as you said, the frustration piece of it. But then, all the affection that he actually has for Cliff, usually expressed when Cliff is either in the airplane or out of frame.
My wife has a kind of a yardstick that she uses against things that she really enjoys. And one of the things that she says is that when you're watching a movie, the way you can tell you really enjoy it, when you can't decide who your favorite character is, because everyone who's currently on the screen is your favorite character. And I think this movie has that certain bit. I mean, you say to yourself, "Oh, I really like Billy Campbell. Oh, I really like Alan Arkin. But you do that with, oh, I really like it when Timothy Dalton." Well, we'll talk about Timothy Dalton later. But everybody in this movie, when you see them, like, "Oh, I love that guy. I love this girl." And I think that is probably why I enjoy this movie so much, is that there's so many likable characters, and these people do their jobs so well. You believe that Alan Arkin this time is an aeronautical engineer who wanders around fixing things with chewing gum and baling wire, and does a good job of doing that, and tries to keep as upbeat as possible. We're going to end this first minute here with a character actor going by. Actually, he's the first time we see somebody on the screen that has a recognizable face, and that's the character Goose, played by Don Pugsley. He doesn't get front billing on any of these things. He'll be in the back credits about 100 minutes from now. But Don Pugsley is you've seen him in a million things, and you'll know his face immediately. Here he's pushing the tail of the GB out toward its destiny with whatever's coming in the next minute.
And that's that first glimpse. Now, I describe myself as an airplane nerd. I wear that mantle proudly. So for me, if I didn't know this was a GB from the very first frame, then I have no business being here.
Yeah.
But it's nice that just as you see Goose, that's also you just see that GB logo, that stylized GB cursive print, indicating, of course, the Granville brothers, who were the designers and manufacturers of these airplanes. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, and I keep wondering, as seeing the GB, I wonder how much Doug Chang was affected by the color scheme of seeing the GB, a beautiful, black and yellow. It's the colors of a bee. When he designed the Naboo ships on Phantom Menace, it seems.
Oh, that's a good point.
It seems to be the same color scheme: the black up front, yellow in the back, and it's just such a striking color that it's high visibility. Everybody from the designers of the GB to Werner von Braun used that to see things far up in the sky.
And we'll see a lot of that as we look at the other airplanes in the movie too. That they weren't afraid of using bold colors on that beautiful bright red with black trim. The Miss Los Angeles sitting there, all kinds of things like that. They just we don't see that so much anymore.
No,
today airplanes usually white.
I think that's a common. I've been in lots of museums talking with curators and things like that. I think that's one of the biggest surprises that many people have when they visit actual, relics of the past. When they see the planes from especially in general aviation. We have a tendency of thinking of the past in black and white. We think that all these things are different shades of gray. But I think when you see them live in person, when you're looking at this stuff, it is a riotous group of colorings. I can think of there's one in the National Air and Space Museum, the Vin Fizz, which you would never guess has this most lurid purple. Vin Fizz was a grape soda, and that's what. And yep. the Vin Fizz average it's like naming a plane the Pepsi Cola or the Red Bull. So Vin Fizz was painted on the sides of the wings of this aerobatic plane. It's just this brilliant purple. It's faded over the years, but you can imagine this thing flying in the sky and going, "What is that?" So these things were attention-getting devices, and partially for safety, you didn't want to slam into another plane that was in the sky with you, so having it painted some color other than sky blue, that was a great safety reason. But it really is a kind of a doorway to the past that you realize these people actually knew their stuff in full color.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, this was our first minute of the show. We've done have to make a confession as we're going through this. Some of these are out of order, so we may talk about things more than once, but there are many great episodes to come. And thank you for being with us here on our first minute. We've got a lot of things to talk about, and I don't want to push it all into one episode. But yeah, please stay tuned. Sign up for us on iTunes and on Google Play, wherever you're listening to this on your mobile device. You can find us by looking for Rocketeer Minute. We are also there's a couple places you can find us on social media. The ever-present Twitter. Look for Rocketeer Minute. You can also go to Facebook, the Rocketeer Minutes Bulldog Cafe, where we get together and talk about every one of these single minutes. You can pick up past episodes, and as we were talking about shopping for cool Rocketeer swag at our great big website, rocketeerminute.com. We've got all the episodes here. We've got places for you to comment on stuff. You can even send us emails and tell us how much you like or don't like the show. But we take all your comments and ponder them endlessly. One thing we do want to express is our gratitude to the two guys who pioneered and promoted or evangelized the movies by minute format. That, of course, is Pete the Retailer and Comic Book Alex of the Star Wars Minute. They've really shared this type of a podcast with the rest of us. And thanks to them, there's dozens and dozens of shows now that cover movies in this by the minute per episode format. And so we just want to give a good shout out to them and say thanks. And if you would like to catch up on the guys who really know how to make these kind of things, go check out StarWarsMinute.com. But join us back here tomorrow on RocketeerMinute.com, and we'll talk more about the GB and Chaplain Field, where all this may or may not be taking place. So we'll see you here tomorrow on the Rocketeer Minute. Until next time, over and out.